when we look at something like, even some of the things like in chemistry, when you look at the existence or even like the appearance of iron, one of the things which the Quran says, when Allah says in the Quran, is that وَأَنزَلْنَا الْحَدِيدَ فِيهِ بَأْسٌ شَدِيدٌ وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ, that we caused to descend from the heavens iron, which serves as a something of strength and something of benefit for humanity. Now what's interesting is that they theorize, again, modern chemists, that based on the energy capacity, based on physics and chemistry, based on the energy capacity of the solar system, that it would be impossible for this particular solar system to generate enough energy to actually create even an atom of iron. That actually you would need 4 times the energy of like the sun and the different chemical reactions to actually form iron. So they theorize that iron wasn't formed on Earth, but actually it comes from outside the solar system. So it's extraterrestrial, that it's not capable of being produced within the Earth. And again, that's something which the Quran talks about, that Allah caused this to descend from heavens as a tool of strength. And now, of course, we know that iron, which is used in steel, is used in all of our buildings, and a source of benefit for humanity. If we move on to the second part of that verse. So the first part of that verse was how we shall show them our signs in the furthest and the farthest expanses of the universe, but even within their own selves. Even within themselves. And if we look at the life around us and even the life within us, we see, for example, that Allah says that وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيًّا أَفَلَا يُؤْمِنُونَ, that we created from water every single living thing. Will they not believe? And another place that وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ بَشَرًا فَجَعَلَهُ نَسَبًا وَصِهْرًا, that we created man from water and then we established his families and his ties of kinship and lineage. So, and of course now we know that the vast majority of our bodies is nothing but water, and the remaining composition of our bodies is clay, or the actual, literally it's a representation of what the earth is composed of, that the same elements and the same proportions that are found in the earth are found within us, the same fractions of carbon and hydrogen and nitrogen and things like that, that's exactly how our bodies are composed of. And the Quran talks about this too when Allah said, وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ سُلَالَةٍ مِنْ طِينٍ, that verily we created man from a representation of clay. So sulala is like a sample or a representation of clay. And again, that sort of jives and that corresponds with what we know now. When we look at things like embryology, and this is one of the most beautiful things that, again, just embryology could be a different lecture in and of itself. But at a time when again, people didn't know how life was created and where it comes from, what exactly is the origin of life, the Quran beautifully and just in precise detail describes how human beings are created and the various different stages of creation that happens within our mother's wombs. And keep in mind that, again, that this is a book which comes 1400 years ago to an unlettered prophet who obviously has no access to microscopes or advanced imaging techniques to actually see the level of detail that some of these verses talk about. And so it says that that we created humanity, that the first stage is the nutfa stage. The nutfa stage is the actual joining and the union of the male and the female fluids. So the sperm and the egg, that is what was considered nutfa. And then it says, ثُمَّ خَلَقَنَا النُّطْفَةَ عَلَقًا. So after the union of the next stage of life that it resembled is that it resembled a clot, or like a leech-like thing that clings. So that's what an alaq is. And if you think about the stages of fertilization, that after there's fertilization of the union of the sperm and the egg, that it actually latches on inside the womb, that it clings on like a clot. And then it says, فَخَلَقْنَا الْعَلَقَةَ مُضْغَةً. And then we made that leech-like clot into it looked like a clump of chewed flesh. And again, if you open up the books of embryology and things like that, that this is exactly what the human embryo looks like as it goes through the early stages. These are like microscopic levels of creation, that it actually looks like a lump of chewed flesh. Like if you have chewing gum and you chew it for a little while and you spit it out, that's what we all look like at one particular point in time. And this is again what is described within the Quran. And then it continues that فَخَلَقْنَا مُضْغَةً عِظَامًا. And then we created from this lump of chewed flesh, that we gave it sinews and nerves and bones. That we created the internal framework, the skeletal framework of the human body. And then it says, فَكَسَوْنَا الْعِظَامَ لَحْمًا. And then we clothed these bones with meat, meaning like the muscles of the human body. فَكَسَوْنَا الْعِظَامَ لَحْمًا ثُمَّ أَنْشَأْنَاهُ خَلْقًا آخَرَ. And then we brought forth from it a totally different and other creation. And then God says, فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ. So praise be to God, the most excellent and the most perfect of creators. And so what we have here, again, is the exact stages of creation. Starting from fertilization to the clinging of the alaq, to then how it becomes like a lump of chewed flesh, and then how it gets bones, and on top of the bones we have the muscles and the rest of the human body, which is then created. That all of those stages of creation, there's no possible way that a human being could have known that, and yet it's described perfectly and in vivid detail. And what's interesting is that there's one of the foremost anatomical and embryological professors now, a man by the name of Keith Moore, who actually writes a book by the name of Essential Clinical Anatomy, which is used in medical schools. It's one of the staple books in medical schools, and at UIC at least, we used it for our anatomy course. But he actually quotes these verses in the book by saying that this was something that was mentioned in the Quran 1400 years ago. And then on top of that, what's also interesting is not just the physical creation that's described, but even the internally physical creation in terms of how we gain our faculties is also mentioned in the Quran. So for example, Allah says that هُوَ الَّذِي جَعَلَ لَكُمُ السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَارَ وَالْأَفْئِدَةَ. That He is the one who created for you your hearing, your sight, and then your af'idah, which is your minds, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ, in order that you may be thankful. Now what's interesting, that if you look embryologically, that this is the order that we gain our senses. That the inner ear is formed before our eyes are formed. So you have the ear, which is formed, and then the eye is formed, and then actually you have the brain, which is the center of understanding, which then forms. So even if you look at it temporally and spatially, that's the stages, that's the order of creation that's followed. And then in terms of one of the things we know now about our bodies is that we know that we all have unique fingerprints. That the fingerprints that I have are different than anybody else in the room. And even if you have identical twins who are completely identical, every single gene within them is the same, but they still have different fingerprints. And of course that's why they use fingerprints to identify people on things like CSI and stuff like that. That's why you have fingerprints. Now what's interesting is that the Quran says, in a very fascinating thing that God rhetorically asks human beings, that after you're dead, He says, أَيَحْسَبُ الْإِنسَانُ أَلَّا نَجْمَعَ عِظَامًا. Does man think that we are not able to bring his bones back to life? بَلَا قَادِرِينَ عَلَىٰ أَن نُسَوِّيَ بَنَانًا. But nay, we're able not only to do just that, but we're able to even bring back the tips of His fingers. The tips of His fingers. And this is a proof that God uses to remind humanity of resurrection, that not only will we be brought back to the individual and the unique shapes and figures that we have, but even our individual pattern, literally our fingertips, our fingerprints, will be brought back to life. As a proof that God, if He created you one time, He can easily create you once again.